Hi, it's me Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe my channel and visit my Patreon page, link in the description.
I grew up in a small village in the Penites, where my father was the minister at the local church. Our family had lived there for generations, and although I didn't have any brothers or sisters, I was never lonely. There were always plenty of cousins around to keep me company. As little children in the 1940s, we all wore embroidered smocks. Our parents weren't especially well off, so they couldn't always afford new outfits for each child. Boys and girls alike wore almost identical clothes until we reached school age. It was only then, around 5 or 6 years old, that we learned the school rules. Boys were to wear shorts and girls, skirts. Still, coming from such close, extended families, we all played together without much thought about who was a boy or who was a girl. No one ever said I couldn't join in a skipping game just because I was a boy, or told my female cousins they couldn't play marbles. We grew up simply accepting that some of us would grow up to be mums, and some would become dads, but with a blissful lack of awareness about any real differences. In fact, I'm quite sure that until I was well into my teens, I thought that sex was simply the number that came after 5. Every Christmas, our family had a tradition where the younger children, myself, and 20 or so of my cousins, would put on a costumed play at the manse. One year, when I was about 8 or 9, my favorite cousin Wendy, who was a few years older, suggested we swap roles. She wanted to play the brave male hero, so I agreed to be the fairy princess. Wendy wore my doublet and hose, while I was dressed in a cut-down version of my aunt's ball gown, complete with a little silver wand and a tiara in my hair. To our young eyes, our performances were nothing short of spectacular, especially the dramatic kiss at the end, which we had carefully copied from a classic film. Our parents were less impressed. I was lucky. I only received a stern lecture about appropriate behavior from my father and was promptly enrolled in the Cubs. Poor Wendy, however, was sent off to a girls' boarding school. Still, some things are difficult to change. When Wendy returned during the summer, we would sneak away to play by the River Avon. Far from the village, we'd swap clothes and pretend. She would be Alex and I would be Wendy. Wendy, being a true tomboy, loved dressing in my sturdy short trousers and flannel shirts. As for me, I couldn't wait to trade them for her light, printed dresses. Wearing her clothes felt freeing somehow, even if climbing trees was trickier. Wading across the river, however, was much easier in a dress. If the water got too high, you just lifted your skirts. Sure, you might get your slip a little wet, but it was no big deal. We chatted for hours, sharing secrets and silly dreams. It was a special time, and I was deeply hurt when Wendy's teenage years pulled her away from me. After she turned 13, she preferred spending time at the cafe in town rather than playing at the river. By then, though, I had grown close with Marjorie, a classmate who lived just a few streets from me. Since her mother worked, which was quite rare in our village at the time, Marjorie often invited me over to play after school. Marjorie loved dress-up games. One afternoon, she suggested we play mums and dads, but this time, she insisted on being the dad. She mischievously made me hand over all my clothes so she could swap into them. Curious about everything, she examined my cotton shorts and pointed at the small buttoned flap in the front. "What's this for?" she asked, poking at the buttons. I chuckled at her question. "It's for when you need to go to the bathroom," I explained. "You only open it when you need to wee." "How peculiar," she said, fascinated by the little details. I, in turn, was equally curious about her clothing, especially the fact that she wore 2 layers of underthings, something I had never seen before. One afternoon, while playing at Marjorie's house, we decided to act out a mummy and daddy game. Since I was playing the mummy, I had to dress up in all her clothes, including a starched school blouse, snug white cotton shorts she fondly called lilies, a knee-length pleated skirt, and an underskirt. While pretending to make tea and wash dishes at the kitchen sink, Marjorie went upstairs to the bathroom. There I was, my arms deep in soapy water, dressed head to toe in her neat school clothes, when I caught sight of her mother walking up the road from the bus stop. Panicking, I bolted upstairs, pulling off the skirt and blouse as I ran. We scrambled to change back into our regular clothes as quickly as possible, hoping to avoid getting caught. However, I soon realized something very uncomfortable. My own clothes were damp from leaning over the sink, and little drops of water were trickling down into my socks. Feeling sticky and miserable, all I could think about was getting out of the house as quickly as possible. Marjorie's mom invited me to stay for juice and cake, but I stammered an excuse about needing to get home for tea and hurried toward the door. As we walked to the gate, I turned to Marjorie, upset. "Why did you wet my clothes?" "That wasn't fair. My mom's going to be really angry." Marjorie put on a lofty, superior expression. "I didn't. And you shouldn't make up silly stories," she said. "Maybe now your mom will tell you off properly." She also muttered something about trying to figure out how my clothes worked and not succeeding, but I didn't pay her much attention. All I could think about was how much trouble I was going to be in. And indeed, my mom was not pleased when I got home, and I received a very sharp scolding. After that day, I didn't really want to play with Marjorie anymore. But perhaps it was just as well, because I had started to develop other interests, collecting stamps and learning to swim, hobbies that soon became my new passions. By this time, I was living in one of the older tenement areas on the outskirts of the city. In those days, it was quite difficult to find a room in university halls, so like many fellow students, I found lodgings elsewhere. Through the kind help of my Aunt Mavis, I secured a single room in a flat owned by a kindly widow, Mrs. McPherson, though everyone affectionately called her Mrs. Mack. She lived in a 3-bedroom flat on the 3rd floor of an old building, but only rented out one room. The guest room, she explained, was kept for her niece who visited occasionally on weekends. I didn't mind at all, the room suited me perfectly. My first term at college, however, was much harder than I had expected. I hadn't worked particularly hard at school, so the workload at university felt overwhelming. I spent most of my time studying, rarely getting out socially. It was part of the reason why things didn't work out with Beth. She said I wasn't good at commitment, but what she really meant was that I couldn't take her out often enough. I thought I had left my old childhood quirks behind, until one cold November night, when I found myself absent-mindedly exploring Mrs. Mack's laundry. At first, it was accidental. But before long, I began secretly borrowing items like slips and underskirts left on the drying rack or in the laundry basket. Late at night, when the house was silent, I would try them on in the privacy of my room, patting out the tops with rolled-up socks and admiring myself briefly in the mirror. Mrs. Mack favored old-fashioned, voluminous undergarments made from soft nylon, and I always made sure to return everything early the next morning, perfectly folded. Every evening on my walk home from college, I passed by a ladies' hosiery shop. They always had elaborate window displays of delicate clothing, and I often found myself inventing excuses to walk back and forth past the shop just to glimpse it again. The window displays sparked vivid daydreams, silly, harmless fantasies of wandering through the shop and trying on all the beautiful garments. Eventually, after months of hesitation, I couldn't resist any longer. One cold February afternoon, I summoned all my courage, opened the door, and walked into the shop. One evening, I finally mustered enough courage to step inside the hosiery shop I had been walking past for months. A young woman behind the counter greeted me warmly. "Good evening. Can I help you?" Flustered, I muttered a clumsy excuse, something about having a twin sister who lived abroad and needing to send her some specific clothing items. When the assistant asked for sizing details, I was completely lost. So I pointed awkwardly at a display set in the window, a matching yellow set made of soft fabric, adorned with little ruffles and delicate white bows. She took what seemed like forever wrapping the items, carefully counting the change, and speaking loudly enough that it felt like the whole shop knew exactly what I had bought. Red-faced and mortified, I almost ran from the shop, clutching the little brown paper bag as though it contained the crown jewels. I swore to myself that I would never put myself through that ordeal again. However, later that night, I couldn't contain my excitement. The thrill of having my very own carefully chosen outfit hidden safely under my mattress was overwhelming. Late at night, I would quietly lock my door, try everything on, and admire myself in the mirror. Inspired by the feeling of freedom, I started to notice shop windows even more closely. But it took me almost 2 more months before I could summon the courage to visit another store. This time, I picked a different shop several miles away. I had even done my homework, carefully studying size charts from my landlady's mail-order catalog to make sure I would know exactly what to ask for. There was a beautiful display in the window, a soft pink top, a matching slip, and a delicately patterned set that immediately caught my eye. Feeling as ready as I could ever be, I entered the shop, only to find, to my horror, that the same shop assistant from before was behind the counter. "Hello," she chirped. "I suppose you're buying more gifts for your sister? Still about your size, is she?" I flushed deep red. Mumbling something about needing directions, I hurriedly asked where the number 49 bus stop was, then rushed out without buying anything. That incident put a damper on my confidence for nearly a year. That evening, feeling embarrassed, I decided to throw away the clothing I had hidden away. Life returned to normal after that. I focused on my studies, even earning a place on the college swimming team. I worked hard and earned excellent marks by the end of the academic year. Over the summer, I found a job working on a construction site, tough, physical work, but it paid well. It was there that I met Margaret, a tall, lively blonde who worked in the firm's office. Margaret wasn't exactly the type of girl I had imagined myself dating, but she was cheerful, funny, and we quickly became friends. At first, she was a bit puzzled by the fact that I shaved my legs, but when I explained that it helped improve my swimming times, she thought it made me look like a serious athlete. Being a student with prospects helped too. We went out a few times, and after a shared bottle of vodka and a lot of laughter, there were a few clumsy, but innocent, kisses in the back seat of my parents' car. Margaret even suggested I meet her mother, which, at the time, felt like a serious step. By the time I returned to college that autumn, I genuinely believed that I had left my old habits behind me. I tried once again to get a spot in the student halls, but places were scarce for second-year students. So I wrote to Mrs. Mack, my old landlady, asking if she might have a room. To my surprise, she agreed. However, as she explained in her reply, she had turned my former room into a sewing space, so if I didn't mind, she could offer me the guest bedroom instead. I was just happy to have a place to stay. When I moved back into Mrs. Mack's for my second year at college, I was in for quite a surprise. My old room had been small and basic, just a bed, a table, a chair, and a wardrobe. The guest bedroom, however, was much larger and quite different. It had the usual furnishings you'd expect from that era: flowery wallpaper, a 3/4-sized bed, a dressing table, a tall chest of drawers, a wardrobe, and a bedside cabinet. But what made it stand out was the decor. All the soft furnishings were a pastel pink, trimmed with delicate lace frills. In one corner, there was a walk-in cupboard, almost like a little dressing room. I was already a little taken aback by the style, but even more surprised when I opened the wardrobe to put away my things. Inside was a tightly packed row of girls' dresses. There wasn't even room to hang my jacket or blazer, so I turned to the cupboard instead. But the cupboard, too, was almost full. Rows of skirts and blouses, shelves stacked high with sweaters, and hats neatly arranged on the top shelf. The shoe racks were piled high with boxes. It didn't stop there. Opening the tall chest of drawers revealed various clothing items, undergarments, delicate slips, and a whole range of vintage styles neatly stored away. Even the dressing table drawers were full of bottles, creams, and an impressive array of costume jewelry. Only the bedside cabinet stood empty. Later, over tea, Mrs. Mack apologized. "I'm really sorry, Alex," she said in her warm Scottish lilt. "If I'd known you were coming back, I'd have kept your old room. But I spent the summer turning it into a sewing room, and when you wrote on such short notice, I didn't have time to clear the guest room. But I'll move the things out in time, if you don't mind bearing with me." I was struggling to keep a straight face. Part of me was fascinated by the treasures hidden away in that room. The last thing I wanted was for her to clear it out. Trying to stay composed, I said, "It's quite all right, Mrs. Mack. The room is perfect as it is. I only need the hook behind the door for my jackets and a drawer for my other bits and pieces. You don't need to move anything." She looked relieved. "Oh, that's real good o' ye, Alex. I didn't hae space in my own room for all that gear. I'd be real grateful if you'd just let it stay where it is." And so, that set the tone for the next 6 months. Every evening, I would hurry back from college, have dinner, and retreat to my room to study. But before starting my essays or reports, I would close the curtains, lock the door, and quietly explore the wardrobe. I would carefully choose an outfit from the wardrobe or cupboard, enjoying the simple ritual of dressing in styles so different from my usual college wear. Once dressed, I would brush my hair, sit neatly at the table, and work on my college assignments, feeling somehow more focused, more at ease. It became a secret, comforting routine during those months, one that, in a way, made the second year at college unexpectedly memorable.
Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.